Hello, welcome back to the podcast Journey to Well. So today I am joined with another breathwork practitioner, Leo Mars. He is the founder of the first breath studio in America, a really early pioneer of bringing breath to communities, and his community philosopher, creative entrepreneur, forthcoming author, which we'll talk about your book at the end of the episode. Leo, thank you so much for coming on. We forgot he's also a 3-5 Sacral Generator, which we're going to talk about human design. So thank you so much for coming on. One of the things that we were kind of chatting about before we started was, how do we introduce you? Like, what are the hats that we should put on? And we all wear so many different hats all the time, and it's really hard to pick a few or pick the right ones, right? So I'm going to turn the reins over to you to introduce yourself. Who is Leo? And then we'll start our conversation about breath.
Yay. Well, thank you for having me, Hannah. I'm happy to be here and have enjoyed our conversations up to this moment very much. So I'm Leo Mars. I am an entrepreneur born and raised in Alaska. Have always kind of had a tilt toward, I was raised Christian
Mm.
and memorized a lot of the Bible growing up in private school. And, I always felt a strong resonance with basically, like as an adult, I see it as Christ consciousness. And that wasn't something that was really talked about, in my private schooling. There's a lot of even emphasis on the Old Testament, which I was always kind of like, what the heck am I memorizing genealogies for?
Right.
um, so I've always had a kind of sense of the mystery and of the larger kind of narrative, like what's going on here, and wanted to understand what a good life is like and how to, use magic, if you will, and understand magic.
Mm.
So as an entrepreneur, you are just kind of inherently agentic. You're really deploying magic every day, all the
Mm.
time. And you have to hold, that wand is in your hand. So so I've always had a very strong connection to creativity and to making a difference. And it wasn't until I was 27 years old when I was running a very successful nightclub and four-star restaurant that I had opened and designed at
Mm.
25, that I kind of had a non-ordinary state experience happen in the shower, of all places, of course.
Always random.
Yeah. Yeah. And those shower experiences, So this experience really shook me to the core and changed my trajectory, or, really, really altered my worldview, my sense of self, my sense of what a good life might look like
Mm.
very deeply. I was visiting my father in Alaska, taking about a week away from my businesses in the city. And uh, it was about 6:45 in the morning, water's falling down my body, just an ordinary shower. And I somehow slipped into this altered state of consciousness. It wasn't an out of body experience. I was still looking through my eyes, but it felt as though, you know, there were no thoughts in my head. And really, from like a mechanism of action perspective, I think that's maybe what had to do with it. I don't know how I got to this thoughtless place, but there wasn't a single thought in my head. So I would say, like, looking at that from a rational perspective, what that did was it essentially gave me no sense of location other than through my eyes. So I had a sense of like, here I am staring at the shower curtain, kind of pulsing in a trance, but I am everywhere. I am, beyond the walls of the bathroom, beyond the walls of the house, beyond the stratosphere of the earth. And this experience really shook me to the core. There weren't many qualities to this kind of awakening state, but there was a deep sense of, I mean, there was expanse, there was a sense of freedom, a sense of like genie out of the bottle, like I can breathe. But one of the only qualities that that state had, um, I knew, just like somatically, intuitively, I knew that I could just effortlessly exhale an entire universe into existence. And so that really stuck with me. There's a many series of events that happened. This was 27 years old. I'm 42 now. So that was, quite a few years ago. Many winding turns, but I got very interested at that point in the big questions like, who am I? Where do we come from? What's going on here? All of a sudden, the teachings of, all the great masters really lit up in my awareness. I realized, like, oh, that wasn't just for them. Like, these states of enlightenment are for all of us, not just these masters. So that got me, you know, into a very, really deep yoga practice. And I tried getting into meditation, always struggled with meditation. We talked about that a little bit. And one thing led to another, got into was pulled into the inner circle of kind of a high level of philosophy and something called integral theory, which was a meta theory that essentially is made of all perspectives and models and theories. Um, and and then when I discovered the breath, which we talked about a little bit, it was like, oh yes, this is it.
Yeah.
Um, don't need any psychedelics now.
Yeah. Right.
So
We can talk about that too.
yeah,
I
yeah.
remember. I want to let you finish, but a quick note. Everyone typically assumes that I also do plant medicine journeys because they're just so similar and not similar. You have similar states of consciousness, I would say. Although I have no idea because I don't do plant medicine journeys. And I think you even asked me that, and I was like, I haven't felt the call or the pull, and I love breath work, and it's something that I can put myself into instead of in my mind. I have a lot of blocks around any sort of external ingesting any sort of external
Mm.
supplement or whatever. Although I do drink alcohol, so we're walking
Hmm.
contradictions. But
Yep, yep,
anyway, so keep going. Yeah, just so interesting that you brought that up. But keep
yeah,
going with your story. Love it.
yep. So yeah, so I guess I found the breath, went through some, several years of very deep psychedelic use, and what I would do is I would uh, I would basically fast for 24 hours, and then I would take a heroic dose of some entheogen. Typically, I was using mushrooms or LSD in
Mm,
my home with my basically just me, my garden, myself on like I'd start like Saturday afternoon and go until like, the wee hours of the morning.
mm,
And, that was, you pay a lot for that. That's a very expensive toll to, understand the nature of reality and consciousness. You lose sleep and, you can really get sometimes, particularly with the synthetic, with the synthetic stuff, you can get stuck in some really dark spaces. And,
mm,
um, but really have been cultivating my own, uh, I would call it like a design philosophy for life for, 14, 15 years now. I call it evolution by intelligent design. It's kind of a synthesis of two apparently paradoxical ideas. The idea that consciousness is emerging out of the evolutionary process, with the idea that essentially spirit is evolving itself into form or descending into form. It
mm,
really kind of resolves for me one of the conflicts is or one of the challenges has been how can I be I am, how can I be everything, um, and also at the same time be this human organism with this personality and this brain and these drives and values and proclivities and so yeah, gone really deep into philosophy and mysticism, and but I feel very deeply, very strongly that creativity is at the core of our process I see creativity as how we participate or like make love with the universe, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And breath is just a massive, to me, um, it's the most potent tool we have to live a better life in this modern age. Opened the breath studio in 2018, early 2018, before breath was kind of a trend. In fact, if you look
Yeah.
up Google, keywords, the trend actually started within a couple of months of opening the studio.
Um,
So that was really totally unplanned, but well timed. And had a chance to really see how the breath affected everyone's lives. People would come in, I've witnessed thousands of people come in with the weight of the world on their shoulders and leave a breath session with a spark of hope, or a new lease on life, even after one breath session. So I'm a huge advocate of the breath, and really respect what you're doing as well, Hannah.
Thank you. Thank you. Obviously, likewise, it was one of those things that um, changed changed my connection, my ability to connect to my body, my ability to connect to, I love that you're saying creativity and creation and love and all of these things, because truly that's what I experience. I don't know that I've worded it that way before. I will say I love bringing in human design, and one of the things that I noticed about your human design chart is we all have defined centers and undefined centers and open centers, and they're just like these shapes in our chart. They're energy centers, which if you're familiar with the chakra system, I'm sure you are. They roughly pull from the chakra system. We have 7 chakras, 9 energy centers, because the heart and the solar plexus are split into 2 different centers. But you have 3 defined centers, and they're all like lower centers. So you have your root
Mm.
chakra, your root center is defined. Your solar plexus. No, hold on. I'm messing this up. Your root chakra, your sacral center, and your spleen are defined, which are all like kind of pull in that creativity and that groundedness and that love. I mean, the sacral center is really our center of love as well, and pleasure and all of these things. So I think that's really kind of cool about your journey and your human design chart. But you talked about having trouble kind of settling into meditation and getting into meditation, and you and I are similar. I've was blessed. My mother had me meditating when I was young. I was a child. Actually, I've never shared this story, so I will share
Mm.
it with you. Um, I was struggling with math. I've never been a math person. I've always been that like philosophy, language, English, definitely thrived more in those. But math and science never really liked, history never really liked. And so I was learning my times table in whatever grade that was, 3rd grade maybe. And I couldn't learn the times tables. I was really struggling with it. And my mom one day, she was like, you know what, Hannah, this is not a punishment. This is something that I want to explore with you because I think that it would help. I'm going to wake you up 20 minutes early before school every day, and you're going to come in bed with me and you're going to meditate. And she would sometimes do, most of the time, it was some sort of kind of simple guided meditation. And in her favorite part of the story is that I did so much better in math and I learned my times tables and all of those things. So I've been meditating on and off since I was a child, and then I started meditating heavily in college. Um, but truly, I think the faster that our lives go, the harder it is to keep that meditation practice and be able to settle into a meditation. You and I kind of
Mm.
talked about the difficulty of going from 100 miles an hour to 0. It's like stopping your
Mm.
body, stopping your mind. And that is a true practice. And I still meditate, and I have nothing against it. And I also found that breath was this another doorway to get into meditation. I always call breathwork an active meditation. I don't know if that's something that you ever
Mm-hmm.
talked about. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I do too.
my question would just be, what is your experience with that? Because I think that's something that resonates with a lot of people. I talk about
Hmm.
meditation with my community, and a lot of them is like either, oh, I can't meditate, or I think I meditate the wrong way, or I can't slow my brain down, and then we just kind of get away from it because it's difficult, and we think that we're doing it the wrong way, which
Yeah.
there's
Or
no wrong.
something's wrong with me, maybe.
Yeah.
That was my internal dialogue.
Yeah. So yeah, I would love to hear that kind of part of your story, and then what is different about breath work to you and your experience versus meditation?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question, and it's definitely at the core of why, it really was so useful for me, and such a breath of fresh air, pun intended, to discover to discover. Yeah, so when I was 29, have you heard of
No.
Vipassana meditation? So
Oh,
they
maybe.
yeah, typically they're 10-day silent meditation retreats.
Hmm.
So when I was 29, I came across Vipassana somehow, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna apply for this. And if I get accepted, which they do have a pretty strong filter system, it's all on donations. And um, if I get accepted, then I'll come out like Buddha on the other side. This is perfect. It's
Yeah.
well, all I got to do is discipline myself for 10 days and I will be enlightened. But yeah, I went to this Vipassana retreat in some beautiful kind of nature preserve in Oregon. And that's the 10 days of silence. And what I discovered within the first 12 hours of, after the first kind of like everyone congregates in the meditation hall, and the guides are like, okay, at this point forward, you're gonna, not gonna talk for 10 days. What I discovered within the first 12 hours of that was, I'm pretty crazy. And I was sharing, we all had kind of bunk mates. So I had a cabin with a bunk mate, and, going into a space with a stranger where you're sleeping for the next, week and a half, and not being able to talk to each other, just kind of head down, looking at the ground. You're just kind of with your thoughts. And that was it was a rude awakening, to say the least. I realized all of these all of these voices in my head, all of the inner critic, and all of the kind of like the survival like voices kind of started chattering, and I'm like,
Mm.
and they just got louder and louder, and I'm like, oh no, I don't think I'm schizophrenic, but like it sure feels like I'm schizophrenic.
Yeah.
There was nowhere to kind of like, expel any of that energy. It just
Um,
gets to stay in here.
yeah.
And so I made it through. It requires a lot of discipline to get through a 10-day Vipassana retreat. I think they say like 40% of people leave by day 3 or 4, because you're just sitting in like 36 by 36 inch
Oh.
space for 10 hours a day in meditation. 1 hour segments, but 10 hours of sitting on that thing every day. And so you're dealing with extreme pain. By day 4, they start what they call strong determination. So strong determination is when it's like, find your position and don't move for the entire 1 hour sit. And that's like literally do not move. Like you breathe, but don't move a muscle.
Ugh.
Um, and
Sheesh.
so it was extremely painful, both psychologically and physically. I left that experience, really probably as close to like having suicidal thoughts as I've ever been.
Yeah.
And, I went home and started a pretty strong meditation practice where I was really committed for months. But I thought, I just can't break through. Something's wrong with me.
Mm,
I'm the lost cause.
mm,
And then when I discovered the breath and realized, oh, like to me now, meditation is it's like a byproduct of what I would say like essentially like equalizing or regulating the nervous system and sitting in a state of silence or witness. So I'm trying to think what your question was, but
Oh, it was just your
yeah.
experience and what you felt the differences are between breathwork and
Hmm.
meditation and also the similarities too, because there's a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's said that the Buddha never gave uh, meditation instructions without starting with breath awareness.
Hmm.
Um, and I do think that, especially in our modern age where we're just so overloaded with information and to-do lists and all the things, that it's where pretty much we should always start. I think that goes for probably most humans.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's the reason why, so many people struggle with meditation. We sit down with a dysregulated nervous system, we're getting cut off in traffic and, you know, haggled by debt collectors or whatever's going on, dealing with the stress of just being a modern human,
Yeah.
relationships and all the things. So yeah, for me, I see them as kind of you know a partnership. I prefer breathing into meditation,
Mm.
by and large, and this is pretty much the only way I'll do it, unless I'm like, in a really beautiful, serene setting in nature, and I'm just like, oh, I don't have a place to lay down. I might go to my breath. Yeah, so I think that Eckhart Tolle says in A New Earth, and I'll paraphrase, he said, "You cannot think and take a conscious breath at the same time.
Hmm.
Conscious breathing stops your mind."
Hmm.
So
I
for
love
me, I really see it as a support. Breath is a kind of a support and a gateway into states of meditation.
Hmm. Hmm. I love that. Thank you for that quote and that information and that reminder. That's definitely something that I find. I told I told you this. Maybe everyone's an overthinker. I don't know if I overthink more than the average,
Yeah.
but I spend so much time up in my head and so much time. Um, I just always feel like I have so many thoughts running through my mind, and one of the things that I learned in my specific training of breathwork is um, it's this opportunity to really be present with the body and the sensations that are coming up in the body, because our body is always communicating to us. Our body is always sharing these insights and these pieces of wisdom, but it speaks a lot quieter than our mind. And so, one of the things that I always invite my clients to practice, that I also certainly practice with breath, is noticing the sensations, noticing the breath. Like, where are you breathing into? Can you breathe all the way down into your tailbone? What does that feel like?
Mm.
Versus breathing into your stomach or breathing into your rib cage, and noticing what sensations are arising and not getting stuck in the story behind. Oftentimes we're like,
Mm.
oh, my shoulder hurts. Oh, it's because I'm so stressed, or I must have slept the wrong way, or I had a really hard like arm workout and I must have just kind of like twinged something. And we get so that's where our mind immediately goes, is the story behind things. Same with emotions. So if we find an emotion is arising in a breath work practice of like, oh, I'm feeling really sad right now, what is the story behind that? Can I like connect that to a memory, or can I connect that to something that's going on in my life? Maybe it was a hard conversation I had with my sister last week. And what if we didn't connect it to a story? What if we didn't follow up, I'm sad because just I'm feeling sad right now? What if I
Mm.
allowed myself to cry? Or I'm feeling happy. What if I allowed myself to laugh? I had someone in my breathwork class last week, and she was like, I just wanted to laugh so bad, but I didn't want to throw other people off because they were crying. I'm like, no,
Yeah.
girl, laugh. Like, if you
Oh
feel like you
gosh. Yeah.
need a laugh, laugh. And she's like,
Yeah.
I don't even
Yeah.
know why. Like, I didn't have anything. I just felt, like I needed to. I'm like, do it. Your body wants to
Uh,
express that emotion too. It's not
Yeah.
always the heavy either, which I don't know
Yeah.
what your experience is with that, but
Oh yeah. Oh
yeah.
yeah. I love that. That laughter from the breath, like especially like I've seen that with newbies to the breath quite a bit, where they're just like, why am I laughing?
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
it is so cool. I kind of see like having, ran the breath studio for those, couple of years before COVID. There's the way I've kind of like I kind of categorize facilitators a little bit. Like I see I see kind of
Do
like
it.
two 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 sides of the street when it comes to breathwork facilitators. There's kind of the agony side of the street, and there's the ecstasy side of the street.
Mm,
And both of these are definitely like crossing over. Like you
sure.
don't, it's not like, oh, all we're gonna do is like, trauma dump and heal ourselves. And there's always a bit of both in each. But yeah, you'll find facilitators that are more leaned into that work, the trauma healing, and clearing of the nervous system. And then you have this other side of the street, which are honestly like my favorite facilitators. Oftentimes, like some of my favorites are like ex like international DJs, for example.
Sure.
And they're like their bodies can't handle the late nights and the drugs anymore, so they guide breath work. Um,
I love that.
yeah, yeah. In fact, I don't know if you know Lisa De Narvaez of Bliss Point. Do you know
No,
her? She's
no.
one of my favorite. In fact, she probably is my favorite ecstasy side of the street guides.
Okay,
Yeah, she does some stuff online now, so you might check her out.
I
But
will.
um, yeah, so I kind of see those two sides of the street, and that's actually why, one of the reasons I love breath so much is because it is a kind of Swiss Army knife. It'll
Mm,
meet you where you are, and
mm,
if you need to feel joy and just pure joy, it will let you feel that.
yeah.
But it really ties into your body's wisdom, and
Mm,
yeah, let your body kind of do its thing.
mm,
But man, with the studio, man, the things I
mm.
have seen, I mean, you name it, I've seen it. And we used to open up the container at the end of the class and be like, okay, if anyone wants to, be witnessed, if you will,
Yep.
um, you know, now's your moment. The room would go silent and people would start speaking up and sharing their experiences. I have heard the wildest things. I I realized today that I need to leave my spouse.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
I forgave my mother today. I got the title for my book today. The range just so wide and really touches into both that agony and the ecstasy.
Yeah. You said something like breath is a tool and you're going to get out of it what you need to. And I've met different kinds of breathwork practitioners and all are great. I would say that I've met some that are more of that trauma clearing. And to be honest, maybe that was me in the beginning. I don't know. Um, but I felt some kind of pushed that, like, let's clear the trauma, let's get into
Yep,
the childhood trauma that you haven't accessed in 20 years and let that all come up and
yep,
kind of almost I think as a facilitator, we have huge responsibility and huge power because we're creating that container, and you can lead it however you see fit. And I'm not judging other people at all, but what I strive to settle into is really allowing the breath to be the tool and the navigator and that Swiss Army knife. Like, you're pulling out whatever part of the Swiss Army knife that you need for this moment. Who am I to tell you what you need? That you
mm,
need to clear your trauma, or you need to regulate your nervous system, or you need to express more joy, whatever. And really allowing the breath to be that navigation
Mm.
rather than me. And it's so interesting to hear other people at the
Mhm.
end because, and right,
Mm.
we get so in our heads once again because they're like, oh, I did not get that at all. Like, I didn't have this like
Yeah.
huge moment, like come to Jesus moment. Did I do it
Yeah.
wrong? Absolutely not. You didn't do it
Yep.
wrong.
Yeah.
Maybe that's
Yep.
where you're nervous. And then if we're coming from a nervous system standpoint, that's where your nervous system was at. And your body will never push you further than you can, than your nervous system can handle it.
Yeah.
Um, and I don't personally believe that as the practitioner, I'm here to push you into. I don't think that that is safe either.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I know, a couple of things that you said earlier, I do want to touch on what you had mentioned about, how you coach your clients to kind of go in and listen at a somatic level. I
mm,
know for me, as a lifelong kind of like type A entrepreneur, got to
yeah,
control everything. Um,
that's me.
that's yeah, yeah, yep, yep, guilty.
Yeah.
But those experiences can range as you just reflected on. They can be like, oh, not really much happened today, but like I feel peaceful. And then other days you're like, oh my gosh, like I just saw God, or
Mm-hmm.
or I went into some dark spaces that I didn't know were there, and it was
Yep.
important for me to see. But that listening to the body, and as we've touched on breath awareness a little bit, this is another kind of place where I kind of categorize, if you will, the Swiss Army knife. It's like, I think the big blade is the scalpel is probably the breath work, the active
Yeah.
breathing, and then what we might call the active meditation side or breath awareness side is not manipulating the breath, just returning to the breath, bringing awareness to the breath and really reaping the benefits with a little bit of practice. And it's not hard to get there,
Mm.
fully in the present moment. And that's, one of the practices that's been really useful for me is using breath awareness, going, okay, I'm just going to bring my awareness to my breath. There it is. And then going, okay, let's see if I can bring that awareness a little deeper into my body. And then it'll start to drop down my neck, down into my abdomen. Okay. And what's the energy feel like in here? Is it contraction or expansion? Is it tension or excitement? And what I've noticed, and this is kind of like a new practice for me as of the last couple of years, I met this spiritual coach, this kind of self, designated spiritual coach in a cold plunge up in the mountains year and a half ago.
Mm.
And we just had a short conversation with him, but I asked him, I said, what do you find yourself telling your clients most often? The advice
Mm.
that you tell them most often.
Yeah.
And he said, basically, Aleister Crowley's do what thou wilt. He said, do what feels best to you in
Mm.
each and every moment, and you'll just be stacking wins in your life.
Mm.
And I think, we have so much conditioning and, a sense of obligation to other people. But what I've started to do is I've stacked that breath awareness and then bringing the attention in to listening and then going, okay, if it's expansion or excitement, then whatever it is, like I might be in a state, a certain
Mhm.
type of state that would induce that feeling. But particularly if you're faced with kind of a question, or if you're in an interaction with another human being, or if you're just doing something, um, if it's a contraction, that's a no.
Mm.
It might be that you're holding fear and that you're creating some of this with your mind, but that could be what it's a no to. It's a, oh, I'm not postured or oriented to this moment, right? But then what feels like a yes? Where is the excitement? If there's
Mm.
excitement, that's a yes. Move
Yeah.
in that direction.
Yeah. Leo, you are talking human design right now.
Yeah.
This is
Nice.
exactly what I say So I have more questions, but I normally end with human design, but I'm gonna throw it in
Yeah,
right now because I mean, this is you segued perfectly and without even knowing
do
it.
it. Nice.
So sacral, I said you're a 3-5 sacral generator. Sacral is your, what we call in human design, your authority. This is your decision-making process. And everyone has different authorities. Splenic and sacral are very similar in this way. Exactly what you just said is when we feel a yes, often the sacral and splenic, I would argue, we feel this kind of like pull forward. We feel this opening. We feel this levity. We feel excitement. I always coach my clients and I say, you find and define what a yes means to you. So that could feel like for some people, I notice for me, I actually get this like bodily pull forward, like I lean forward. I also find I make a lot of vocalizations. So it'll be like, is my yes. If it's a no, I almost always feel that contraction or that like, mm, a contraction, but like this maybe like tension in my belly and my stomach. And I actually, when I was little, I used to tell my mom, Mom, my belly hurts, my belly hurts. And she navigated that means like something's wrong, like something's misaligned with Hannah. She has something that, we need to dive into. And so you define what a yes and a no feels like. And I love that you are kind of looping in this come to the breath and actually play with the breath and take in that inhale and see what the breath is telling you, how it's connecting to your body. I'm definitely going to steal that from you and
Do
coin it,
it.
and I will use it with my clients. But I will quote you in it. But I love that bringing in the breath because often, again, when we're in kind of this disconnect, I think sometimes when we're in our head, we do have this disconnection to our body. And how can you feel that sacral center? How can you feel that yes or that no if you're not coming back into your body? And breath is a
Hmm.
way to come back into your body.
Yep.
So, anyway,
Yes.
that was your sacral center.
Oh, okay. Well, I
Yeah.
didn't have access to that for most of my life. That's, it took
Um,
some guidance from the outside and a little bit of like logic going, oh, okay, that all makes sense now. And
yeah.
then I'll start practicing that because I'm tired of making bad decisions. It just takes too much of a toll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I truly do believe that your body has the answer. And we just spend so much time. I know I do. I mean, I'm not preaching to everyone. I'm preaching to myself when I say we spend so much time living in our head. I know I do. Um,
Mhm.
so let's talk about, I want to go back to this as we're kind of wrapping up this creation, this creator, and finding the creative within us. Something that I always said that I'm like, don't say this about yourself, is I'm not creative. I don't
Mm.
feel like in the past, yeah, I'm trying to work on my self-talk. In the past, I have felt that I'm not a very creative person. And art and like painting and drawing. I'm not an artist. I am a musician, that I will gift myself, but I'm not very creative. So how does breath connect to creativity?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that that distinction, in fact, I think I might do some work to kind of get explicit about defining this idea of like being creative in a more of a puritanical artistic sense. And I don't really find that very useful because obviously we're all creating every moment of our lives. We're creating this, as you just said.
Mhm.
I'm creating these words. So yeah, we're all creative and we're all creators and we're one with the creator in many of the mythologies. And we're made in the image of the creator. For me, and it's kind of wild actually that in the story of Genesis, in the beginning was the Word,
Hmm.
and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, and the Word was spoken and basically became flesh and dwelt among us. And that's happening through the breath. Vibration, that's basically intention giving shape to the breath. Um, so, for me, and we spoke about this a little bit before starting today, the probably the biggest impetus for being such an advocate of breath practices and breath as a tool is to empower that creative force within each and every one of us. Um, I said something before we started recording. I see creativity as kind of like cosmic lovemaking, and
Mm,
we can't not create, right? Like
mhm,
we can't not do it. But we can choose to be conscious creators or intentional creators, and that doesn't mean controlling things. That means participating with self-awareness and with a certain level of consciousness. But for me, whether it's the actual active breathing, the breath work, or the breath awareness, both of these use cases are to bring us ultimately to bring us to the present moment. And it's in that present moment when we do get present. For the longest time, I was pushing the idea of always be evolving, always be improving yourself. And I realized about 4 years ago, I realized, my goodness, there's something going on here that I can't see. And I realized that in my own ideological view on this, I was I was basically in a constant state of on a subconscious level rejecting myself in the moment. If I always need to become, or if there's always an opportunity to be better, then on some level, I'm rejecting myself in each and every moment I'm alive. And it got to a point where I was like, man, I'm doing all these things. And on some levels, I'm like, I've moved a lot of lines of my intelligence forward. You know, um, I am evolving as a human, you could say, but like
mm,
something's wrong. So I think it's when we get into the present moment. And if you've ever noticed this, like, for many years, I would slip into these states of just incredible like flow and peace. And I'm like, and not to be cliche, I'm not saying like necessarily flow state,
yeah.
nootropics. I'm talking about like living in our power, where we're almost in a fearless, very potent, drawing on all of the resources of our consciousness in such a way, like if you think about the limitations of fear and worry and anxiety and stress, you're constantly trying to kind of like, I would say, like rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic. Um,
Yeah.
and it's like, hey, just jump in the freaking ice water, okay? And
Yeah.
what we don't realize is that we're born again when we die, when we jump into the ice water, um, you know, on the other side of fear, right? On the outside of your comfort zone, all of these kind of like truisms. So for me, like the breath work does the heavy lifting of kind of getting the like misconceptions, mistaken identity stuff out, the trauma, the emotional energetic blocks out so that we can be more present.
Mm,
And then the breath or the breath awareness is kind of like our anchor, our more practical moment by moment tool. So
mm,
the more we clear that stuff, the easier it is to use that that breath awareness to be in the moment, but all in service of being in the moment so that we can create our lives from a place of purpose and power and clarity.
mm, mm. I love that. I love that distinction of, yeah, using the breathwork journey as a tool to clear, and then using breath awareness as this daily, moment by moment tool that we can always bring back to, that we can always incorporate in our lives, and really be the creator rather than be created. We spend a lot of
Yes.
time listening to other opinions and other people, and whether they're opinions of people that we highly respect or just giving our power away to what somebody says on social media, or what the
Yeah.
school teacher says or our parents say. I mean, well, hopefully
Yeah.
we respect our parents, but um,
Yeah.
very, very interesting, very cool distinctions, and thank you for making that. I've actually, again, never really had that distinction before. So I love that. Tell me, I know that you said that there's a lot of coming back to the creator and really coming into our life in that mindset of I'm constantly creating my life and finding that creativity in your book. So I would love
Mhm.
for you. You're writing it. It hasn't come out yet, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Honestly, I've been writing this book for 15 years. I started it under another title
Okay.
15 years ago. And, now I think it was at Christmas time that I was visiting family and realized I was on a hike with my dad up in the woods in Alaska. I was like, it's time. I gotta do this. I'm gonna, slowly kill myself if I don't
Mm-hmm.
take care of
Mm-hmm.
this. So yeah, so I'm writing it. It's called The New Creator: Rise of the Mindful Artist in the New Meaning Economy. And um, yeah, I mean, it's really kind of a manifesto for creatives who want to really live on purpose and in service and in power in this very rapidly changing, technologically driven time that we're living through. Yeah.
I love that. I am very excited for you, and I love that. Um, Absolutely. Time's going by fast, right? And there's a lot. And there's, I mean, that's a whole nother podcast. Maybe I'll have you back on and we'll just talk about technology and AI and finding all
Yeah.
of that. That's not something that I want to get into right now, but it's
Yeah.
definitely something
Yeah.
I want to get into. I think that would be really interesting.
Oh,
Um,
let's do it.
yeah, I would love to. So tell us where we can follow up with you. I know that you also have an app. I would love to hear a little bit about that. We were talking about this before. There's so many tools, and I don't claim to have the best breathwork practice or the best approach by any means. So I know that you have breathwork in this app as well. So tell us a little bit about the app and then also just how to stay connected with you. Where do you hang out the most? If people are like, that book sounds interesting, let me make sure that I stay connected so I hear when it's
Hmm.
published, all of those good things.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. So this is actually my second breathwork app. I started building one just prior to the pandemic with a couple of partners and just found that I needed to have more creative control. I had a um, someone else as the voiceover, one of my star teachers, amazing humans. We all kind of parted ways in love. But this is my second breathwork app. It's called Ether, ETHR. And if people are interested in checking it out, it's at ether.one, ONE. But basically, I, as I kind of like, I'm leaned into that ecstasy side of the street,
Mm.
as you can probably tell by now. Um, so this is essentially it's the tool that I have wanted and I needed to not only have two taps and I'm breathing to something that I can count on, where I don't
Yeah.
have to think about who am I going to breathe with or what's the, this like, in wellness, I feel like most of the time when you go to reach for, a wellness tool, you don't want to have to make decisions. You're like, like I'm
Hmm.
dysregulated. Just like, give
Yeah.
me what I need.
Yep. Yep.
So it's that. There are two different types of sequences in the Ether app. One I call flows, and the other I call shifts. And obviously, all breath shifts our state. But the flows are kind of like your daily bread or your
Mm.
daily breath. Um, and that helps to obviously regulate nervous system, but also build, VO2 tolerance and endurance and stress resilience and things like that. And then the other kind of category are these shifts, and those are very specifically designed sequences and sound architecture to do everything from like prep for sleep to to energize in the afternoon to
Mm.
clear your subconscious before starting your day, for example. And those have quite a range of different sequencing. So yeah, if you're interested in checking that out, there's a free 7-day trial at ether.one. And then as far as, the book goes, I send an email most Saturday mornings.
Okay.
And it's basically snippets of the new creator of this book. So
Mm.
as I'm doing the research and the writing and the contemplation, I'm sharing it with my email list.
Wow.
And you can sign up for that at leomars.com. That's MARRS, last name.com. Completely free, of course. And I try and make that stuff really accessible and kind of like, it's the type of email that at least I would like to get on the weekend instead of the weekdays. Like, I have
I
my cup of coffee on Saturday or Sunday morning and get some inspiration and some life insight. So,
Mm. What a cool idea. You're really kind of bringing the community along for the ride and along the
yeah,
journey of writing the book, which
yeah,
is very fun.
yeah.
I love
Working in public.
Yeah, yeah. And I will link all of that down below. I'll link the app and the website so you can just easily click on it. Okay, last question. If you were standing on a stage and you had the microphone for a minute and you had the ability to share one message with the world, what would that message be?
Mm. I think you told me you were going to ask this question.
Maybe I did.
Like, oh my goodness. Well, I would say, you are at least 13.8 billion years of life evolving and of intelligence becoming. And you know, all that you dream of being, all of the aspects in your golden shadow, the things you see out there in the world and go, oh, I wish, or oh, they're so, lucky. That's all inside of you, and it's waiting for you to get present. And when you're present and you develop a practice of showing up in the moment, just showing up in the moment, not with a mask on, not trying,
Mm,
when you stop trying and you get present, you step into your power. So step into your power, get present.
wow. Look at you. You should be a motivational speaker. That was beautiful. I
Oh,
need to like
thank you.
rewind that, listen to it again the last minute. Um, wow. Yeah.
Hard
Thank
earned lessons, gotta say.
you. It's harder in practice than it is just
Oh,
listening.
yeah.
But
Well, at least, yeah, I mean, knowing you know that stuff forever, but it
yeah.
gets really easy. It's actually a very easy practice once you get over,
Mm.
building the muscle. Just start flexing that muscle moment to moment, and you'll find your way there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was a really fun conversation.
Thank you, Hannah. It's a pleasure.